Hey everyone, Cory with Hardcore Off-Road again. Today we are working on an '05 Toyota Tacoma. What we're going to do is we're going to put a 12-inch rear shock on it using king coilovers. Several companies build these brackets. These are, I believe, Bay Area Metal Fab. They're all pretty much the same concept. Biggest thing is getting this big shock, big king shock on there in place of the factory, in this case lift shocks, but much shorter stock shocks. It's not a very hard project. Basically, first thing we need to do is obviously remove the tires. Took the original shock out of here. Now we got to cut the original shock brackets off of here. Just make it a little bit cleaner. The other side we actually need to cut it off. We're going to relocate the shock to the front of the axle on both sides instead of staggering front and rear like they are currently. So we're going to cut this upper shock bracket off and the lower shock bracket here on the axle. Now they are welded on pretty good. They will take a little while to cut off. This is honestly probably the hardest part of the whole project right now. We're going to use a mixture of a 4-inch grinder to cut what we can and a sawzall, reciprocating saw, try to get it off there, and we will grind it up, get it ready, and probably throw a little coat of paint on there to make sure it doesn't rust again. So easiest way to do it is cut along right where the welds are here on the frame. Try not to cut into the frame, just cut right along the bracket, along these welds. Leaves less to grind off down the road. We'll go ahead and do this and show you when it's cleaned up. Okay, so now we got this mount cut off of here. We used a 4-inch grinder here, Sawzall to go across the top, 4-inch grinder there. On the bottom, this lower shock mount was kind of a pain. We did have to take the leaf spring U-bolts off to get this bottom plate out of the way, to get this off of here. Now we used the grinder, cut what we could with the grinder, then got the Sawzall in there, cut a little bit more. Couldn't really cut everything. You do gotta be careful. That is the gas tank right there, so you gotta really watch where your sparks are going. We do have a fire extinguisher here in case, but we hope we never need to use that. Now, once I got it mostly cut, just a big hammer, beat it back and forth a little bit. It broke the rest of the way off. Now I'm going to take just flap wheel, clean them up. The lower shock mounts are now going to mount on the front of the axle here, so I'll clean this up, clean all the paint off of that real good. And the upper shock mounts will mount right in this area here. So I'm cleaning all the excess cut, or the excess welds off and the brackets we cut off. I'm going to clean this face up here, give us a nice thing to weld to. And then we will be able to start the install. Okay, so now our rear factory shock mount is gone. We got the frame polished up for our new brackets to go on. Okay, so here we have the upper shock mounts tacked into place. Just all we did was kind of line them up, so when your shock is in your lower mount, it's somewhat centered in the upper mount here. Once they are in place, we got to do a little bit of measuring to figure out where to place these lower mounts. Now, what we did is we measured the shock. The shock collapsed, measures 19.5 inches. We also measured from your bump stop here to your bump stop pad, which in this case is about 9 inches. So we took the 19.5 that your shock measures plus the 9 to give you roughly 28.5 inches. So then we measured, let me back up. Okay, it is 8 inches from here to here, from bump stop to pad. We added an inch, so you'll have about an inch of shock shaft showing, so when you bottom out, it doesn't collapse this shock completely and ruin the shock and give you a bad hit. So I forgot to add, we added an inch in there. So that gives us our 28.5 inches from your upper mount to your lower mount centers. So I measured that, placed this at 28.5 inches. That gives us, you can see, probably, I'm gonna guess 4 to 5 inches extra dropout over what we had originally. And it still will leave us an inch of shock shaft showing once this bottoms out, because once this bottoms out, this will compress a little bit up to here. So an inch should be more than enough, because that's a pretty stiff bump stop. So now everything is mocked up in place. Instead of welding with the shock in here, I took, this is just a different shock sleeve off of another shock. It's the same width as this. So I just put it in there, tighten that up to give me a nice even square bracket here instead of bolting this in and clamping that in. So now that everything's mocked up, we can lift the suspension up, we can test, make sure the shock does not come in contact back here or anywhere through the travel, which it won't in this case. So now we will just pull the shock out of here, weld it all up, throw some paint on it, and move on to the other side. Okay, I guess I should also mention here that we don't want to weld this all at once. The upper on the frame here is not as big a deal. You just got to watch, like I said, the gas tank is on the back side. I do have plates in here. You can't see it, but there's a chunk of metal up here to keep any sparks from going down. We just weld, you know, let it cool before you just weld it all at one time, especially down here on the axle. Now, the axle is still filled with fluid, everything like that. So as long as you don't get too hot, you will be all right. But we definitely do not want to warp the axle or burn the fluid inside of it. So I just welded a little bit here and there. Gonna go back through, stitch it again, probably take about 3 times to weld all this all together. Just letting it cool for 15-20 minutes in between each time of welding. But go back and weld a little more on it. Broke my ground clamp also, so that's why I'm kind of struggling here. Okay, so now we got our mounts all welded in. I painted them just with some good spray paint, top and bottom. I mounted the shock in here. It fits in real nice, adds a little bit of, I guess, eye candy underneath this thing. Wanted to show you one other little thing that I do on a lot of things to mount your shock reservoirs. I just had a little chunk of scrap here. I bent it about 1/4 inch in from each side. It just gives a nice little, I don't know what you want to call it, little mount for a shock to, or the shock reservoir to go onto. So now, all you gotta do for your shock reservoir there, and just take a hose clamp. It beats paying what they want for regular reservoir mounts when hose clamps are whatever, 50 cents a piece. Real simple, real easy. Tighten that up, just the way it is. There you go. Your reservoir is mounted. Shocks are completely on, ready to go. We're going to finish the other side up here, and this thing will be ready to go out the door. Okay, so we have now finished up the 12-inch shock conversion on the back of this with the king coilovers. As you can see, they're definitely visible. Make a kind of a statement right off the bat. Fairly easy install, not too much going on, just some minor cutting and welding.